The palace was silent. Heavy black banners hung across its tall walls, swaying slightly with the cold wind. The sound of distant bells echoed in the air, each toll a reminder of loss. Inside the grand hall, Queen Eleanor sat on her throne, her eyes red and swollen from tears. The hall, once bright and full of life, felt like a grave. Servants moved quietly, afraid to speak, afraid to break the silence of grief. Captain Ethan stood at the far end of the room, his armor scratched and stained from the recent war, kept his head down, not wanting to meet the Queen's eyes. He had failed her. Yes. He had promised to protect Princess Lily, her only child. But now the princess was gone. Everyone said she had died in the battle, struck down during the chaos of an ambush, but no one had found her body. Only a blood-stained ribbon had been discovered near the river. It was the same ribbon she wore in her hair that morning. That single piece of cloth had crushed all hope. The Queen's voice broke the silence. "Why?" she asked, her tone sharp and filled with pain. Her hands trembled as she gripped the arm of the throne. "Ash! Why did you not bring her back, Ethan?" The words cut into him like a blade. He wanted to answer, but his throat felt tight. He had fought with everything he had. He had searched through the burning fields and the muddy trenches, calling her name until his voice gave out, but there had been no sign of her. In the end, he had returned with nothing but guilt. "I tried," he said finally, his voice low. "I swear I tried." The Queen turned her face away as if the sight of him was too much to bear. She waved her hand weakly, dismissing him. "Leave me out." Ethan bowed and left the hall, his boots echoing against the marble floor. Outside, the courtyard was filled with soldiers who had survived the war. Some were laughing, trying to forget the horrors they had seen. Others sat in silence, staring at the ground. The war was over, but there was no joy in victory. He walked past them, heading toward the stables. His mind was heavy with thoughts of the princess. He remembered the way she smiled that morning before the battle, the way her voice carried calm even in fear. She had trusted him completely, and he had let her down. But deep inside, something told him she was not gone. The lack of a body, the strange tracks he had seen near the river, they haunted him. As he saddled his horse, he made a choice. He could not stay here, waiting for days to pass in grief. He would search for her. No matter what the others believed, he would not stop until he knew the truth. If she was alive, he would bring her home. If she was dead, he would find her and lay her to rest with honor. The road ahead would be dangerous. The war had left the land broken, filled with bandits and traitors, but Ethan was not afraid. He had faced death before. For her, he would face it again. He tightened the straps on the saddle and looked toward the northern hills. Somewhere beyond those mountains, the answer waited. With a deep breath, he mounted his horse and rode into the night, the cold wind biting at his face. Behind him, the palace stood in silence, the Queen alone with her sorrow. Ahead, darkness stretched across the land, hiding secrets that could change everything. Ethan did not know what he would find, but he knew one thing: he would not return without her. The cold night air pressed against Ethan's face as he rode through the open fields. The moon cast a pale light on the land, turning the hills into dark shapes against the sky. He pushed his horse forward, refusing to slow down. His thoughts were sharp and clear. He had one goal now: find Lily. The world could say she was dead, but he would not believe it until he saw it with his own eyes. Hours passed before he stopped at the edge of a broken bridge. The river below roared with the sound of rushing water. He climbed down and searched the bank where the fight had taken place days ago. Burned grass still marked the ground. Shattered shields and broken swords lay half buried in the mud. He knelt and touched the soil. It was cold and wet, but near the edge, he saw something. A faint mark in the dirt, a footprint. His heart raced. The mark was small, lighter than a soldier's boot. It could be hers. He followed the track along the riverbank, finding another print and then another. They led away from the battlefield, into the wild. She had been here. She had walked away. That was enough to light a fire inside him. He rode on, following the signs. The land grew rough as he moved north. Trees closed in around him, and the road became nothing more than a path of broken roots and stone. The wind carried the cry of distant wolves. Bandits were known to hide in these parts, and the war had left many men desperate enough to kill for bread. Ethan kept one hand on the sword at his side and his eyes sharp. By dawn, his horse was tired, and so was he. He stopped in a small clearing, built a quick fire, and ate a piece of dry bread from his pack. As he rested, his mind kept drifting back to her face, the way she laughed when the court musicians played. She had been kind to everyone, even to a soldier like him. She had believed in him, and he would not break that trust now. When the sun rose higher, he mounted again and pressed forward. Hours turned into a day, and the signs became harder to find. Sometimes there were no tracks at all, and doubt began to creep into his mind. What if he was wrong? What if the marks belonged to someone else? But then, late in the evening, he saw smoke rising beyond the trees. He approached slowly, moving through the shadows until he reached a ridge. Below him lay a small village hidden in the hills. The houses were simple, built from wood and stone. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the faint sound of voices reached his ears. His heart pounded. If Lily had survived, someone here might have seen her. Ethan left his horse tied to a tree and walked down the slope. The villagers looked at him with wary eyes as he entered. A tall man with a gray beard stepped forward. "You are far from the road, soldier," the man said in a rough voice. "I am looking for someone," Ethan replied, "a young woman. She was lost after the battle near the river." The man studied him for a long moment before shaking his head. "You have no one like that here." Ethan felt the weight of those words, but something in the man's eyes told a different story. There was a flicker, a small hesitation. He was hiding something. Ethan stayed calm. "If you see anything, tell me. She means everything to me." He turned and walked away slowly, but his mind was sharp. He would not leave. He would watch. If Lily was here, he would find her. The truth was close now. He could feel it in his bones. As night fell over the village, Ethan took shelter among the trees. His sword lay across his lap as he waited in silence. He had made a promise, and nothing in this world would keep him from keeping it. The night was quiet except for the crackle of a distant fire in the village. Ethan sat among the trees, his cloak wrapped tight against the cold. His eyes never left the cluster of wooden houses below. He was sure now. The man with the gray beard had lied. Someone in that village had seen her. Maybe she was there at that very moment. He would wait for the right time. Hours passed slowly. Then, just before dawn, a door opened. A faint glow of light spilled out, and two figures stepped into the yard. One of them was the same man Ethan had spoken to earlier. The other was a woman carrying a bucket. They spoke softly, their voices blending with the wind. Ethan moved closer, staying low, his steps silent. As he crept near the edge of the village, his heart froze. Sound cut through the still air of voice. It was faint, but he knew it. He had heard that voice before, in the palace gardens. On quiet mornings, when the world seemed safe, Lily, he followed the sound to a small house at the far end of the village. Its windows glowed faintly. He crouched behind a pile of logs and listened. Her voice came again, tired but alive. She was inside. Ethan stepped out of the shadows and knocked on the door. Silence fell, then footsteps approached, slow and cautious. The door opened a crack, and a pair of frightened eyes met his. It was a young boy. "I need to speak with her," Ethan said in a low voice. "Please." The boy hesitated, then opened the door wider. Ethan stepped inside. The room was warm, lit by a single lamp, and there, lying on a bed near the fire, was Lily. Her face was pale. Her arm was wrapped in bandages, but she was breathing. She was alive. For a moment, Ethan could not speak. Relief crashed over him like a wave. He moved closer, dropping to one knee beside her. "Lily," he whispered. Her eyes opened slowly, and when she saw him, tears filled them. "Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought you were dead." He almost laughed, but his throat was too tight. "I could never leave you," he said softly. "You're safe now. I'll take you home." She tried to sit up, but pain stopped her. Ethan helped her gently, careful not to hurt her wound. The villagers who had taken her in stood nearby, their faces uneasy. The gray-bearded man finally spoke. "She was near death when we found her," he said. "We hid her because soldiers were searching these hills. Not all of them were loyal to your queen." Ethan nodded. "You saved her life. For that, I thank you." The man gave a short nod and turned away. Ethan knew they should not stay any longer. If enemies had been searching for her, They might still be close. He wrapped Lily in a thick cloak and lifted her into his arms. She was light as a feather, too weak to walk. They left the house quietly, the cold air biting at their faces. Ethan placed her on his horse, climbing up behind her to hold her steady. The road ahead was long and full of danger, but none of it mattered now. She was alive, and he would not fail her again. As the sun rose, they rode into the forest, leaving the village behind. Lily rested her head against his chest, her breathing slow and even. The first time in days, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. He had kept his promise. But his relief was short-lived. By midday, he saw signs that they were being followed. Broken branches, tracks in the mud, someone was on their trail. He gripped his sword and kept riding. Whoever hunted them would not take her again. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks sharp against the sky. Ethan knew they had to cross them to reach the capital. It would be a hard journey, with snow and cold winds, but he was ready. Nothing would stop him now. Not bandits, not traitors, not death itself. As night fell again, they camped beneath the trees. Lily lay wrapped in blankets, her hand resting in his. In that quiet moment, Ethan made a silent vow. He would protect her with his life. He would take her back to her mother, to the palace, no matter the cost. And if anyone tried to stand in his way, they would regret it. The palace stood in silence under a gray sky. Inside the great hall, Queen Eleanor sat on her throne, her face pale and drawn. Her grief had not lessened with time. Each day without her daughter felt like a wound that would never heal. Around her, nobles whispered in low voices, their eyes full of schemes. The kingdom was weak, and some saw her sorrow as an opening for power. Duke Alden stood at the front, his silver cloak trailing behind him. He bowed low, but his words were sharp as steel. "Your Majesty," he said, "the people grow restless. They need strength. Perhaps it is time for new leadership." The queen lifted her head slowly, her eyes cold. "Are you saying I cannot lead my own kingdom?" The duke smiled faintly. "I only speak for the realm. With the princess gone, the line is broken. We need security, a strong hand to guide us." Gasps echoed through the hall, but the queen said nothing. Her fingers gripped the arm of her throne until her knuckles turned white. Alden's words were not just bold, they were a challenge. Far from the palace, Ethan rode hard through the dark forest. Lily held close in his arms. The wind tore at his cloak, and the horse's hooves pounded against the frozen ground. He could feel the weight of pursuit behind them. He did not know how many men followed, but he knew who had sent them. Alden. The Duke wanted the throne. For that, Lily had to vanish forever. Snow began to fall as they reached the base of the mountains. The path was steep and narrow, but Ethan pushed on. Lily stirred weakly in his arms, her breath warm against his chest. "Are we close?" she whispered. "Closer every hour," he said softly. "You will see your mother soon." She smiled faintly, then closed her eyes again. Ethan held her tighter. He could not fail now. The queen believed her daughter was dead. He would change that, would walk into the throne room and prove everyone wrong. By dawn, they crossed the mountain pass and descended into the lowlands. The city walls rose in the distance like a promise, but the danger was not over. As they neared the gates, riders appeared on the road behind them. Armed men, their banners dark with Alden's crest. Ethan spurred his horse forward, his heart pounding. The gates opened just as the first arrows flew. Ethan leaned low, shielding Lily as the horse galloped through. Guards rushed to close the gates behind him. He did not stop until he reached the palace courtyard. Soldiers swarmed, shouting in confusion, but he ignored them. He lifted Lily down, holding her steady as her feet touched the ground. Then, without a word, he strode into the great hall. The queen looked up as the doors slammed open. Gasps filled the room. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Her daughter stood there, pale and weak, but alive. Her hand clutching Ethan's, tears spilled down the queen's cheeks as she rose to her feet. "Lily," she whispered. The name broke from her lips like a prayer. She ran across the hall and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her as if she would never let go. Ethan stepped back, his chest heaving with relief. He had done it. He had brought her home. The hall buzzed with shock. Alden's face turned white, then red with fury. "This is impossible," he shouted. "She was dead." Lily's voice was weak, but clear. "No, Alden, you tried to kill me." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the Duke. He stammered, searching for words, but Ethan drew his sword, its blade catching the firelight. "She speaks the truth," Ethan said. "He sent men to the river. They failed. And now he will answer for it." Guards moved at once, surrounding Alden. He tried to fight, but it was useless. They dragged him down as he cursed and struggled. The Queen held her daughter close, her tears falling freely. "You brought back my heart," she said to Ethan, her voice breaking with gratitude. Ethan bowed his head. "I only did my duty." But deep inside, he knew it was more than duty. He had risked everything for her. And as the Queen's arms tightened around Lily, Ethan felt the weight of his promise fulfilled. Yet the story was not over. The kingdom had seen betrayal. Shadows still lingered. And Ethan vowed he would never stop protecting them, no matter what came next. The hall was filled with voices. News of the princess's return had spread through the palace like fire in dry grass. Guards rushed through the corridors. Servants whispered in corners, and nobles gathered with pale faces, their plans shaken to the core. The Queen remained in the center of it all, her arms wrapped around Lily, as if letting go would make her vanish again. Ethan stood near the great doors, silent, watching the scene. His armor was dented, his cloak torn, and his body ached from days of riding and fighting, yet none of it mattered. He had done what no one else could. He had brought her home. Lily sat on a cushioned chair now, wrapped in warm blankets. Her hair, once golden and bright, was tangled and dull from hardship, but her eyes still carried the same light. When she looked at Ethan, a faint smile touched her lips. He nodded back, feeling something inside him ease at last. The Queen turned to the crowd. Her voice was strong, but her eyes still glistened with tears. "My daughter lives," she said. "Those who doubted, those who whispered, look now and know the truth." No one spoke. Fear hung in the air like a shadow. Alden was dragged into the hall in chains, his fine clothes torn, his face twisted with rage. He spat on the floor as guards forced him to his knees. The Queen stepped forward slowly, her gaze cold as winter. "You sought my throne," she said. "You tried to kill my child. For that, there is only one sentence." Alden's voice shook with fury. "This kingdom will fall without me. You are weak, and your soldier will not always be here to save you." TAKZ moved before the guards could strike him. He grabbed the traitor by the collar and forced him to the ground. "You will answer for every drop of blood you spilled," Ethan said, his voice low. He released him to the guards, who dragged him toward the dungeons. Later, he would face the blade. When the hall cleared, the Queen approached Ethan. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "You have done more than I could ask. You have given me back my heart," Ethan bowed. "I swore I would keep her safe. I only kept that oath." The Queen smiled faintly. "You are more than a soldier now. You're the shield of this kingdom." She turned to Lily, who watched them with tired eyes full of warmth. "And you," she said gently, "owe this man your life." Lily reached out her hand. Ethan took it, his rough fingers brushing against hers. "I owe you more than I can ever repay," she said softly. "You came for me when no one else would." Ethan looked into her eyes and felt something stir deep inside. Something stronger than duty, stronger than fear. "I would do it again," he said simply. The Queen ordered a feast that night, though the air was still heavy with the memory of betrayal. The great hall was lit with golden lamps, and music returned to the palace for the first time in weeks. People smiled again, though their eyes still carried the weight of what had passed. Ethan stood near the edge of the hall, watching Lily laugh quietly with her mother. She looked fragile still, but life had returned to her face. When the feast ended, Ethan stepped outside to the courtyard. The night was calm, the sky clear with stars. He breathed deeply, the cold air sharpened his lungs. He had fulfilled his promise, but the path ahead was uncertain. The kingdom had seen treachery. Enemies would rise again. He knew his sword would be needed. Footsteps sounded behind him. He turned to see Lily walking slowly, her cloak wrapped tight around her shoulders. She stopped a few steps away, her smile faint but real. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "not as a princess, but as someone who owes you everything." "You owe me nothing," Ethan replied. "You gave me a reason to fight." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the night wrapping around them like a quiet promise. Then Lily reached out and took his hand, did not pull away. They stood together beneath the stars, and for the first time in many dark days, hope burned bright in their hearts. The kingdom would heal. The queen had her daughter, the people had their princess, and Ethanethan had found something he never expected. Not glory, not power, but something far greater. And he would protect it for as long as he lived.